The topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4WN Radio.
Let's listen as Lorraine Lapointe, coach, therapist, educator, speaker, and founder of Head Heart Synergy, brings together another enlightened guest to inspire and motivate us to move forward, achieve our dreams and desires, so that we experience midlife awakening.
And I'm your host, Lorraine Lapointe. Today we'll enjoy another candid conversation that reveals how to bring back a sense of balance and how to find forward focus. Today, take just a few moments to join us as we explore the possibilities and the perspectives that provide us with greater inner peace, power, passion, and purpose. Because that's what I call living at the edge of fulfillment in a midlife awakening.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, and welcome to our audience wherever you are in the world. And this is the edge of fulfillment, and it's an opportunity to explore what's keeping you on the edge and how others have found a way to go beyond the edge to experience greater fulfillment in their lives. And today we're focusing on how there are times in our lives when, something happens and in that instant, your life has changed forever. For some of us, that happened. It's kind of like historic events. For some, it's like the day the planes crashed into two tall towers, or the day a president was shot, or more recently, when 50,000 trucks rolled across Canada to stand in the solidarity for freedom and democracy. But these are big social events, and I want to bring it closer to home. Because, I want to know, have you ever experienced an event in your own life that kind of rattled you to the bone? And often we label these events, those ones that really shake us up, we label them traumatic. And when they're not fully addressed, they can leave deep wounds or scars inside us. And predictably, sometimes these become part of our bio. And it can be part of our bio, the way we introduce ourselves, what we tell people about ourselves, that we actually hide behind. So today's show, you're invited to stop hiding behind your bio, because when these events are swept under the carpet or they're trotted out as your story over and over again, they get added to the legacy of trauma that gets passed on to the next generation. And many of us are walking around with a great deal of stress, a number of burdens that we've inherited as a legacy that isn't even ours. Goodness knows what our kids these days may have experienced that will be passed along to future humans. However, that's a really deep discussion for another episode. I don't know that we're going to climb all over that one today. But our guest today was faced with a pivotal decision and situation in her life. It could have devastated her, but she discovered that it doesn't always have to be that way. In fact, she has said, the harder the struggle, the more glorious the triumph. And I experienced such an event when both of my parents were diagnosed at the same time with different terminal illnesses. And that challenge of that circumstance was pivotal in leading me to where I stand today. But before going any further, what I should do is introduce myself to those I haven't met before. I'm Lorraine Lapointe, and I'm host of this live radio and talk for TV program. I'm here each week on the edge of fulfillment to explore and expand our thinking about how we can best show up in the world. And like our guest, I work with many who have reached a point in their life where they're ready to release the burden of stress and overwhelm. They're ready to strengthen their sense of inner self-trust and discover practical ways to care for themselves in any moment, even in challenging times. Because Before introducing our guest, I keep wanting to give you more and more, but before introducing our guest, you'll want to know that any time today, if you have a question or a comment or a like, you are encouraged to share, because here on the Edge of Fulfillment, you create an opportunity to make life better by for someone else in the world, because every comment, like, or share means that my company, Head Heart Synergy, provides access to a day's clean water wherever it's needed most in the world through a company called B1G1. And this means that when you comment or ask a question, you help someone in the world to live better. And I want to thank you for that. And I want to thank you for helping me to help others. So as we take this short break, go ahead, send an invitation to friends or family to join us here on the Edge of Fulfillment. And they can join the live broadcast either through my Facebook fan page, that's the Head Heart Synergy fan page, or here on W4WN, that's the Women for Women Network Radio, or on Talk for TV. So stay tuned. We will be right back.
Did you know video is the future on content? There are 3 good reasons why video is the future of content. Number 1, videos are often more engaging than simple pictures or music alone. Number 2, it's much easier to tell your story through video. Number 3, because we love to watch video, they go viral much faster. Hey, notice you're still watching right now. See how well it works. Next time we can play your video here instead. Ask me how. Shine online on Talk 4 TV and W4WN Radio.
Hey, are you looking for a brighter future? Wishing for greater calm, clarity, and confidence? What if you knew an inside job was the answer? Your mission: stop the inner burn, gain mental fitness so you get more out of life. Imagine in about 15 minutes a day for just 6 weeks. Come on, we'll show you how. Don't miss it. Just go to www.lorraine.gives/M-Fitness and join us right now.
Welcome back. For the past 4 years, our guest has hosted her own live weekly internet radio show with listeners on every continent except Antarctica. And we're not even sure, there might be some there. Our guest loves helping others step up and step out to share their story. And here's a little tiny bit of hers because we want to hear it from her. Good morning, Rachel. In the early 1990s, Kathleen was a little less than 5 years into a second position as a pastor of a large congregation, where one day a senior pastor said she had a choice to make. And I'm not going to tell you what that choice was, but it was one of the pivotal moments in her life. I'm just going to have Kathleen fill in the details because she is in a very different place today than she was. So let's meet her right now. Welcome, Kathleen.
Welcome, Lorraine, and everybody who's watching. It's so wonderful to be here with you today.
It's a delight. So I know that you have a super interesting story, and I know that introduction to that pivotal point. But rather than starting there, would you like to start somewhere else in your story?
Well, not really, because that point in my story became a catalyst for many other things. And so that's there's many other points to the story, yes, and I could go back further, but I'd like to start with that catalyst incident.
All right, so let's dive in, shall we?
Okay. Yeah, and so the choice that I was given 2 options. This was a new senior pastor who had come to this congregation, and it was a couple months after he arrived. He gave me 2 options: resign or be fired.
Oh my!
Yeah, I I had never experienced anything remotely close to that. I was absolutely devastated.
And so you didn't see that coming.
No, I had no clue that was coming, and I felt like a total failure, to be honest.
Wow.
I felt like I had obviously failed myself, failed, in his estimation, the congregation, and I even felt at times like I've failed God in all of that
Oh,
as a pastor, and that's pretty devastating. I was teetering really on the brink of quitting ministry altogether,
wow.
and part of it was because I realized now that I had tied my sense of self-worth to the judgments of others and accomplishments. I was
Oh, say
I was
more about that.
yeah,
That's a critical piece.
right. I was the very first female pastor ever at that congregation, and when I got there, I thought, "Wow, I made it," because this was a big congregation. It was a very important one. Had a lot of reputation, good reputation going with it, and then to be basically fired, uh, that was like from crash, type of thing, and so it I had to find somebody and some way to get some help to get some life back, to get some
Wow.
balance back to me, and, I sought out a coach and a mentor, and with their help, uh, I found out that, you know and came to really firmly hold the belief that each of our value each of us is valued, and the value that we have is a given from God. Now, that's my faith. I know that may not be for everyone, but for me, that it's not something we earn. It's not a
Yeah.
grade that we get like in school. I had always been a very good student in school, and so that was to me kind of the mark of who I was. Is
Isn't it amazing how many people are walking around, though, with the belief, and I think that we're given that belief from when we're very young,
oh
when
yeah,
we're very young, the judgments of others do dictate whether we survive or not. But we walk around with that belief that we need the outside reflection in order to justify who we are and validate who we are. And if we
yeah,
don't get it,
yeah. And if
it's,
we don't get it or get a very negative validation, that can be very devastating to many
yeah.
people. And often we carry that around, those hurts, those pains, without really even realizing that's what we're doing. And that
So much of it is awareness, isn't it?
right,
So much of it is, I said a little bit of that in my intro. I mean, if you're blind to something, you literally do not know it's there.
right.
And that's where reflection from others I find helpful.
It's
Not in the judgment, but in the reflection.
in the reflection that's really, really helpful. But that event became like a real wake-up call for me. It was not
Mm.
just a mirror holding it in front of my face, it was kinda like the 2 by 4 type of treatment, unfortunately. But, it was, um, in many ways, it was a painful lesson, but it was also a very good one because as a result of that, and going through that and learning that my value is not pegged to anybody else's judgment. It's
Mm.
not tied to what I do or don't accomplish. It's every one of us is loved by God just because we are. And to accept that then allowed me to go on and serve for 13 years in a team ministry, and that was with my husband, and we're still happily married, by the way.
Awesome.
So, which can be very stressful if you're doing the same thing with your spouse all day long, every day.
I
Um,
think a lot of people in recent times have discovered that.
yeah.
Yeah.
I also went on to mentor 14 seminary students for 2 years each through their first 2 years of seminary, and now since retiring when I was ready, you mentioned the radio show that I have that's been going for 4 years, and so it's been a delight to be able to do those things, but I don't know that any of that would have ever happened, at least not to the degree with the confidence, with the self-worth, self-awareness and fulfillment that I got after going through that event. And so it became a gift when I switched how I saw it and how I've responded to it. So, and now I use that as part of my introduction, which is
Awesome. Well, the show is talking about stop hiding behind your bio.
Mhm.
I'd love to hear more about that. So, what's
Yeah.
your experience with that whole piece where people hide behind a bio?
Well, until I learned to tell my story and include this in that story, I never shared it with anyone. I was still
Mm.
kind of afraid of the judgments that people would make of me. Yet, well, somebody was fired, a preacher fired, type of idea, even though I technically resigned from that congregation.
Yeah,
But
I would say that a lot of people don't realize that that's even possible.
yeah, it happens more frequently than one would care to think. You know, the pastors get pushed out one way or another, and for a variety of different reasons. It can be many different reasons, but I just hid that and went with the degrees and the certifications I've got, the number of years of ministry, those kinds of things, and never shared this.
Oh,
But
so if what I'm hearing is that your bio used to be factual,
yeah,
but not didn't have the juice of the emotion. It didn't
right.
have it had things hidden that you didn't want people to see. And yet,
Right.
what have you noticed that now that you've stopped hiding behind a bio, what have you noticed is the
I've
difference?
I've noticed that by sharing something like this, part of me, not the degrees, but part of me, people come closer. I'm more
Mm.
real to somebody. No, I'm not sharing, this legacy of this trauma, this bad thing and that, which some people do, then I had this surgery and then that kind of, that's not the same thing.
Yeah.
Um, but to craft the story true, authentic, but to show what I've learned, what I've been able to do as a result of that, uh,
Mm.
and how that has become a win for me, enables other people to see what's possible for them and what maybe I could help them do as well. And so it it's a door that I open up
Ah,
for people.
I love that. Yeah.
Or a window, where you draw back the curtains. And so somebody can see inside of who I am and what I've experienced in
Yeah,
life.
that's what Rachel's saying. Is sharing the story is the hardest part, but once you open the door, it creates a new journey to self-discovery. Yes, Rachel, I totally agree.
Yes.
That yeah, but yet but let's be truthful. Unless you have worked through an event to see the to see the different perspective and to digest what I call digest the emotion,
Mhm.
then it telling your story can be really hard because you're just reinforcing all the negative. And that's what I'm hearing is that you're not saying like tell your like you said, oh, I broke my leg and I was in the hospital for this, and my husband left me and the kids, it's like playing, it's like listening to a country song, right? The dog left, the girl left. Like we're not talking about that because
No.
you have to have digested it and come out the other side and see the benefits and the power in the opportunity, I think.
Yeah, that's very true. But on the other hand, learning to tell the story and where to start in that story can help that process and facilitate that as well.
Oh,
So,
tell us more about that.
well, I've worked with some people and been part of a group going through learning my things where the there's a catharsis, there's a healing that happens when there's part of our story that we've held tight to
Mm.
and not been willing to share for fear of the judgment because of some of the pain that's there. And when we finally release that and are able to share it, that's part of the healing that goes with it. Uh,
Mm.
especially if we can do it in a supportive community to begin with, yes. Um, but it also gives the courage then to be able to stand up and say it to others who may not necessarily be as supportive, initially. But there's still always people out there in a group, if we're sharing it in a group, who will understand that story because they've been through something similar. And hearing somebody else have the courage to share it and to say, yes, this is what I went through. And these are some of the things I've learned along the way. And be able to find those wins that have come through that experience, that gives someone else a permission, in a sense, to be able to start to see their story in a different way and to begin to heal from that. So it's got kind of a double edge to it and a double power when we do that for ourselves and for others.
Yeah, I'm reminded as you're speaking about Brené Brown, who I love. I mean, most of us love Brené, but
Mhm.
when she talks about our personal power lies within our vulnerability.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah.
what you are most afraid and ashamed of sharing is likely to be the most powerful thing for you in terms of defining who you are and standing in your own power and attracting others who you can help too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Beautiful.
so those tough challenges we've met, those obstacles that have seemed like a mountain, that we have to find some way to climb or get around, those can be really powerful things in our lives to not only move us forward, but to help to move others forward as well.
Yeah.
One of my mentors said, the deepest pains can be the greatest source of what we have to share in the long run.
Yeah, I'm totally resonating with that. I'm totally aligned with that. Yes, absolutely. So you have thanks, Jerica. She says, great interview, Kathleen. That's awesome. Good to have you here. So tell us a little bit more about what it is that you're doing today as a result of all of
Well,
this experience.
I'm working with other people, coaching them, but also helping others learn how to do this, to tell their story. And I do like a 5-day challenge from time to time. I'm going to have a master class coming up, and a coaching program for people, not only just to learn how to tell their story, but then to use that to move forward in their life and in whatever they're doing. And the other thing is that I haven't mentioned, there's so much that goes on in our world these days, whether you're an entrepreneur, a solopreneur, faith leader like myself, there's so much competition out there and distraction. It's easy for us to become a commodity.
Yeah, there's a lot of white noise right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When we're a commodity, that means we're replaceable. And so when somebody goes to a networking event or any kind of thing and you're introducing yourself saying, well, I'm a coach. Well, likely there's 2 or 3 other coaches in the room. And so why you rather than somebody else? Or if you say, I work in finance or, whatever it is, I'm a plumber. It doesn't matter what it is. When we introduce ourselves the typical way, by what we do, there's always somebody else there, or they know of somebody else. And so it's easy for us to become a commodity. And which means we're just, you go into the grocery store and there's 6 different kinds of ketchup there. Which one do you pick? If they're out of one, you pick another one, type of thing. And so even with faith communities, well, this one's here. Go there, visit. I like what they're saying. No, I don't. I'll go down the street to the next one. Why don't we learn to tell our story? Because that's the unique thing. Nobody else has that. Nobody else is Lorraine Lapointe with your story. Nobody else is me. Nobody else is any of you who are listening. that's what's truly unique and the gift that you have to give. Nobody else has that.
Well, and what I'm hearing you say is that if you can know how to present your story, like people don't want to listen for half an hour to your story.
No.
Sometimes, I mean, especially when you're networking and you have just a short amount of time. So can we talk a little bit about how you choose your story, how you present your story? Because I think these are critical elements, because some people understand that they need to tell their story, but they really, without knowing how, I
Mhm.
think sometimes it gets I don't know what the word is, misaligned, mispresented.
Right, right. I mean, once we get into our story, the tendency is to want to share the whole thing, all the wonderful details, all the little parts and everything else. And we could go on I could go on for quite a while talking about that incident that I shared.
Yeah.
But, like you said, when you're introducing yourself, maybe at a networking event, oftentimes you have 1 minute, sometimes
Yeah.
less.
So out of curiosity, like stop hiding behind your bio is the name of our show. But when
Right.
your bio is what you're presenting to people, let's talk about how you do that in a minute.
Right. That's what I learned, and that's what I'm helping other people learn. And that's to craft your story in 3 sentences,
Ooh.
and hopefully that you can share within 60 seconds. So, yes, they can be compounded sentences. It doesn't have to be just a short, see Jane run type of thing.
I think when I tried this, I had a lot of ands.
Yes. We can make it a compound sentence, but the idea is not to make it a paragraph.
Right.
So, and that's the tendency of most of us, because we like to add all of those juicy details to it, or it gets a little repetitive as to how we say it. So it's paring it down once we get it. But the idea with this is to realize where you've started to solve the problem or overcome the obstacle. Finding that point is really important. And then what happened just before that? And for me, it was, getting that choice to either resign or be fired. And that became the point just before I realized, hey, something's out of alignment here. I can't go on like that.
Mm.
And so then I started learning how to change and alter that. And so you start just before that. And every good story has 3 parts, a beginning, a middle, and an end. And so the beginning is just before the problem, the obstacle that you encountered, or that challenge. And then you go, the beginning sets the context, the people involved, and when it happened.
I love, did you catch Rachel's comment? I think she's so right on. People's attention spans are quite short these days, like a goldfish.
Right.
You gotta hook them in the beginning. Yes, Rachel, I agree with you. And actually, that is scientifically true. We have the attention span of a goldfish, which is about 7 to 11 seconds. It's pretty pathetic.
I'll say it's even less than that. So, heaven help us with that. But anyway, so you start right before the problem and then describe that problem briefly. What was the heart of that? And for me, was finding that, yes, I got that ultimatum, but finding that I was pegging my value on other people's judgments, other people's valuing of me and what they thought was good or bad, right or wrong. And
so can I interrupt for a second? Do
Sure.
you find that starting with the story about you is where you begin, or do you put a sentence at the beginning that kind of encapsulates why you're going to say what you're going to say?
No, it's all about you. And so start it, because anything else at the beginning basically distracts from your story and why you're sharing that. And so it gets people focused in a different direction, and then they've got to switch, and some people don't switch. that
Right.
thinking that quick. And so keep it focused totally on who you are and what the people, the situation, that basic little beginning, the context, and then into the problem. So anything else we say before that is it's not necessary at that point in time.
So for instance, when I was working on some of this stuff, because I love your challenge and love your stuff, I actually started with a very broad statement
Mhm.
leading into my story. But now I'm thinking that what I really should have done is said sometimes the things that we say in jest or we joke
Mhm.
hold more truth than we realize, like something like that, because or even would you suggest giving the statement that
Yeah,
was pivotal for me?
giving the statement, who was involved in this situation besides you, if there are others, and when was it? The when is, was it yesterday? Was it, 10 years ago? You know, give us some context of how recent or how far past it was. And so if it was something from your childhood, say when I was a child or when I was a teenager, something for give us, when in time are we pegging this type of
So
thing?
so for me it would be, so for most of my life I used to hear myself say, I better get this done today or I could be hit by a bus tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I never knew where that came from.
Yeah, you could do something like that. And
Yeah, and
also to,
it turns out that it actually was true. My grandfather was hit by a bus, a double-decker bus in London,
wow.
just a few weeks before I was born, and that changed my whole life. But there, I'm starting to give you
Right.
my whole thing, but so I'm hearing the difference,
Yeah.
which is awesome.
Right.
Yeah.
And so, just jump right into that instead of any kind of setup, because that's the part that captures somebody's attention, that hook at the beginning type of thing
Awesome.
as well.
So
So,
we so when you're starting your story, how does your story how or your bio start? Can we hear how it starts so that we understand what you
yeah,
mean?
you did the first sentence for me. It's in the early 1990s. I was a little less than 5 years into my second position as a pastor. A new senior pastor came and one day said to me that he was giving me a choice: either
Ah,
resign or be fired.
right. And so you've given the timeline, you've given the situation,
Right.
you've taken it to the pivotal point,
Right.
all within the first statement.
Well, actually, that was part of the second sentence as well, but
Okay.
it could all be part of that first one too. And
Yeah.
so it's, what are the really essential parts of that? And just get right into it.
And I hope our listeners can hear how that would be intriguing, as opposed to standing up and saying, "Hi, my name is Lorraine. I'm a coach and hypnotherapist." Like, yeah, 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 yeah. Tune out, tune out. When you start with a piece of who you are, a juicy piece of who you are, people are riveted.
Yeah. I mean, I used to stand up and say, hi, I'm Kathleen Panning. I'm a pastor. Okay, so what? you know,
Run! No, sorry.
so what? You know,
My father was a minister, so I always have those kinds of jokes.
but but for some people that automatically puts up a stone wall.
Yeah.
Yeah, because of their experiences with faith or whatever, it automatically puts up a stone wall. But starting with, a little less than 5 years into, and then somebody came to me and gave me a choice. Okay, what is that choice?
Mm.
That adds an element of curiosity to that and to draw somebody in. And then the choice options were resign or be fired. Oh, oh, yeah,
Well, and I would imagine that people from many walks of life would connect with that.
yeah,
I mean, whether you've had a job when you were a teenager or later, through the years, I'm sure there are many people who have had situations where they've left a position under less than favorable circumstances.
right. Right. And, with the pandemic, it could be, the business is closing, it's
Yeah.
gone, something
Yeah.
like that. And suddenly, without any warning, you have no employment. So, it doesn't matter necessarily how that comes about. There can be other elements that make it more difficult than, for different reasons, but it's still the same sort of thing. Suddenly you're without a job.
Do you find it that choice is the critical piece? That you had to come to a choice? Is that a really critical piece, or can it be a circumstance where you didn't have a choice, or something that you've reflected on, or
I
or
mean,
is that too specific?
I had a choice, but no matter which one I chose, I was out of there.
Right.
And it wasn't my doing to leave. It was
So it,
a
yeah.
matter of semantics, basically, and what I presented to other people, that I was
Right.
resigning versus they said I was fired, So, and it was still not really my choice to leave.
Yeah,
That,
because I always say, choice equals freedom.
yeah,
And you had no freedom there.
not
There was no freedom there.
right.
That was
Right. One way or the other, I was gone. So, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
And so once you get then to telling that middle part of what really happened, that pivotal catalytic moment, as I call it, um, it's good to add a little bit about how you felt about that. So
Oh,
I would
okay.
say something like, instead of just saying, I was given that choice, but I was devastated by that.
Mm.
And that I've also found that I, you know, I really felt, sometimes I say that I wasn't good enough at all for anything.
So it would trigger all those negative saboteurs. I call them saboteurs, the
I
10 saboteurs. It would trigger all of them to like perk up and start to show, yes, all of the negative stuff, like, see, we told you weren't good enough, or see, people don't like you, you've
Yeah,
been rejected, oh my goodness, you need to run and hide,
yeah,
who do you think you are to be a pastor in a big church? Like, all that negative stuff is all what I call the saboteurs.
right,
It
right.
will eat away and tell you about your past, keep it top of mind, keep
And
it replaying over and over.
they were loud and clear. That was the only thing I was hearing at that point in time. And a lot of self-judgment, which I assumed was judgment from others as well.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting that the perception was that it was judgment of others when you discovered it was actually judgment of yourself.
Yeah. Well, most of us take that judgment from others, which we do get from time to time,
Yeah.
and put it on ourselves. And, us take on the uh, criticisms, critiques of others, which is really their opinion and their viewpoint, and we take it on as a self-judgment. So,
Especially people who we value.
yeah, yeah,
I find that can be the most devastating and all it needs is a look or a couple of words or a carefully, not even carefully, a placed question like, really, is that what you think is important? Like something like that from someone you
really,
value.
yeah,
And you yeah, really, you can literally, it can feel devastating, it can feel like the rug has just been pulled right out from under you.
yeah,
you
most,
know and then it takes, well, let's talk about what it takes to go from that perspective to the new perspective or a different perspective. So let's talk
well,
about that part of the story.
yeah, for me, it was, you get to that middle part, and then how did you begin to solve this?
Mm.
And for me, it was working with a coach and a mentor. And I mean, I can literally remember the day and the place where I was when it really sunk in and hit me that God loves me and values me just because that's God. And I have value given. And that was, some people might call it a revelation if you're in the faith community or that kind of thing, but it was just that strong and that real, to know without a shadow of a doubt from that moment on. But it was because I had been working with people and hearing the idea and the reality that, when somebody else says something that seems negative, that's their perspective. And I don't have to wear that. I don't have to accept it,
I love the statement, I'm not responsible for your opinion.
Right. Right.
You can have any opinion you want. I'm not responsible for your opinion.
And I'm not even necessarily responsible how somebody else understands something.
Right.
I can say all I want, but they may not still be able to hear me and to hear what I'm saying.
Everyone comes at information and input from their own perspective.
Right.
And from their own experiences and from their own values and beliefs. Right. So you really never know how you're going to land with someone.
Right.
You might have the best of intentions and they can't hear you. or because of their experiences, they can't see it from the way you're presenting it. And what I'm hearing a lot of is the judge saboteur. The judge saboteur, it has three. We've all got one, and it's the kingpin, right? Is judgment, and it judges us. Like I was saying, who do you think you are? But more importantly, also it judges others. Who do they think they are? Huh, look at her go. Oh my God. She must have been a terrible pastor to be fired. Those kinds of judgments. And then it judges circumstance, like, ours and others. And so we bring all that baggage into a conversation unless we can notice that we're in that state of mind and then switch it.
And I didn't know any of that kind of stuff until after that pivotal event and started learning it. So, which seems ridiculous because as a pastor, I went through counseling courses and all that kind of stuff in my training. But, I wasn't a psychologist or that kind of thing. And a lot of the things that you're talking about, nobody had labeled the judge saboteur as such back when I was going through seminary, which is now several decades ago.
and to be fair, I would say that in the last 20 to 30 years, I mean, beforehand, when I first started studying the brain, it was all from a negative perspective, and in the last, I'm going to say 20 years, but we've started to look at things from a more positive perspective. So hence positive psychology versus dark psychology.
Right.
And so perhaps in the training that we originally received, and I know my own training as a teacher and as an educational leader, at the beginning, it was not positive. It was, we were looked for the problems.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we weren't given the solutions either.
Right. There's still a lot of people who do that. That's what they do. They look for the problems. And it may not be that they're a psychologist or that kind of thing, but that's kind of how we're taught.
Yeah.
We look for what's wrong. And that is a survival technique that's important historically for human survival. Where is the potential danger out there? And we look for that to try and mitigate that.
Well, we are the progeny of the people who stood at the mouth of the cave going, what's out there that I need to be aware of? Because the people who were free-spirited and just went dancing out of the cave and didn't give it a second thought got eaten.
Yeah.
So we are the progeny of those who were more cautious and careful. Not that we need to be hypervigilant. There's not much out there today that will eat us, literally. But we're talking about like psychology or the mental wellness piece of this.
Yeah, they may not eat us, but depending upon where people live, there may be people who get, if you're not careful when you walk out the door, you may get shot. So that's, for some people, that's a very real thing.
Human beings can be scary animals too.
Yeah. And there are people who live in war zones and, all of that kind of thing. So, but yeah, dealing with and learning those things about myself was part of my healing. But if we get back to the story and telling that, once you get through that meat and the problem, then it's time to say, okay, when I solved it, what were the wins that came? And to find 3 things that were, kind of good outcomes, good wins that came from that. And most of us have far more than we ever realize and think about. So, but having like 3, maybe 4 of them in there, that not just, well, I became happier. That's great, but you can't quantify happiness. You can't, nobody can measure, okay, happier, what does that mean? How do I know that? How can I verify that? And so it's to have 3 quantifiable wins, something that can be measured, verified, that kind of thing. And that's why I talk about 13 years in a team ministry, mentoring 14 seminary students for 2 years each, and my radio show for 4 years. That's so. And there are other things I could put in there, but those are the 3 I've chosen for now.
Well, this has been amazing, and we are unfortunately running out of time, but I would love to know, is there anything that you would like to share with our listeners and our watchers that you haven't had a chance to share yet? We have about a minute left.
So I do have and I don't have the link. Oh dear. There is a
your podcast is on the ticker, so people can tune in. That's Retired with Purpose .com/podcast. Is that the correct link for your podcast?
Actually, no, the radio show is boldbravemedia.com /shows/aflame-ministry.
Oh, that's a long one. You'll have to say that one again so that our listeners can grab that.
Yeah, that is a bit longer. That's for my radio show, but I also do have a checklist for learning how to tell your story. And for some reason, I forgot to get that link to give you, but that should be available, and I'll send that to you so that people, if they want that checklist to start working on their own story and doing that, crafting that.
So they can get a hold of me, because Roxy will throw up my email address at support@headheartsynergy.com. And if you send me the link, I can share that with them anytime. But I want to thank you so much for being here today, Kathleen. This has been a fascinating conversation about how to stop hiding behind your bio and get out there and be in front of people and tell your story so they get to know who you are, and so that you can really start to minister to them or help them, support them, and be pivotal in the change of their lives. And we do that for each other, I find. So I want to thank you so much for all of that we discussed today. And
to be here.
Yeah, and I to wrap up, again, if you want to have Kathleen's, you said it's a checklist, Kathleen.
Yes.
And they can write to me at support@headheartsynergy.com. And I am your host, Lorraine Lapointe, reminding you that at the edge of fulfillment, there is a choice. You can stay on the edge, getting what you've already got, or you can become just a little bit courageous and move beyond the edge to get what you really want. And we'll see you next week.
Thank you.